Chief Adeyemi, the voice on the other end, was cold and detached. "We have your daughter," the voice continued. "1 billion naira or you will never see her again." "Who is this and what do you want?" Chief Adeyemi demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. "1 billion naira," the voice repeated, slowly and deliberately. "You have just 72 hours. No police, no tricks, or you will regret it and never see your daughter again." Lagos was a city of contrasts, where the glitters of wealth often stood side by side with the harsh realities of life. But for Adesewa Adeyemi, the only daughter of billionaire Chief Adeyemi, the city was just her playground. Born into a world where money was never an object, Adesewa knew nothing but the finest things in life. Her days were filled with luxury, from the moment she woke up in her spacious bedroom with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bustling city to the late nights spent at exclusive parties in the most glamorous locations. Adeshawa was the epitome of Lagos high society, a young woman whose every move was watched and admired by those around her. She drove the latest cars, each one more expensive than the last. Whether it was the sleek lines of her red Ferrari or the powerful roar of her black Range Rover, Adeshawa turned heads wherever she went. Her wardrobe was a collection of the most exquisite designer clothing, carefully chosen from fashion capitals like Paris and Milan. Each outfit was a statement, a reflection of her status and taste. But it wasn't just her material possessions that made Adeshawa the center of attention. She had a beauty that captivated everyone who saw her. Tall and slender, with flawless caramel skin and a smile that could light up the room, Adeshawa was the image of perfection. Her long dark hair fell in soft waves down her back, and her eyes, always framed by expertly applied makeup, held a confident sparkle that made it clear she was in control. Every evening, Adeshawa would prepare for another night out. Her life was a whirlwind of social events, dinners at finest restaurants, private yacht parties, and exclusive gatherings at the most luxurious hotels. She was always surrounded by the city's elite people who, like her, lived without limits. Her parents, Chief Adeyemi and his wife Alake Adeyemi, were proud of their daughter's beauty and influence. Chief Adeyemi was a man of great stature, known for his sharp business acumen and philanthropy. He had worked hard to build his empire and provided the best for his family. Alake, his wife, was a woman of grace and elegance, was a pillar of support for her husband and a loving mother to her beautiful daughter Adeshewa. However, beneath their pride lay a growing concern. They had given their daughter everything she could ever want, but they couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing in her life. Adeshewa seemed contented with her superficial existence, but never showing interest in anything beyond the next party or shopping spree. "Adeshewa, it's time for you to find purpose, oh," Chief Adeyemi would say, his deep voice filled with concern. He had tried to talk to her many times about finding something meaningful to do with her life, something that would give her a sense of accomplishment beyond the temporary pleasures of wealth. But each time, Adeshewa would shrug, barely looking up from her phone as she scrolled through her social media feeds, liking and commenting on photos from the night before. "I'm fine, Dad," she would reply, dismissing his words as unnecessary. "Everything is just perfect." In truth, Adeshewa couldn't understand why her parents were worried. From her perspective, she was living her dream already. She had everything she could possibly need: luxury, attention, and the freedom. The idea of working or finding a deeper purpose seemed unnecessary when her life was already so full of excitement. But as Chief Adeyemi watched his daughter, a deep sense of unease settled in his chest. He knew that the life she was living, though dazzling, was on the surface, lacked substance. And as a father, he couldn't help but worried about what the future held for his only child. Adeshawa's life of luxury continued uninterrupted, much to the growing concern of her parents. Her mother watched as her daughter floated through life, completely detached from any sense of responsibility. They had always envisioned a future where she would take a meaningful role, whether in the family business or through a profession of her own. But Adeshawa seemed perfectly content with her carefree existence. Her days were spent shopping in the finest boutiques, lounging by the poolside, or catching up with friends over brunch at the exclusive spots in Victoria Island. To her, the idea of working was foreign, almost laughable. She had everything she needed and more, so why bother with the daily grind that so many others were trapped in? Why work when you can have everything? She would often say to her friends, a group of similarly wealthy young women who admired her confidence and envied her lifestyle. We have our whole lives to work if we want to, but right now, I'm just enjoying the ride. Her friends would nod in agreement, admiring her and secretly wishing they had the same freedom that Adeshawa seemed to enjoy without a second thought. For them, work was a distant concept, something they might consider one day, but certainly not now, while their life was full of possibilities and pleasure. However, behind the scenes, Adeshawa's parents were growing increasingly worried. They knew that life without purpose was a life unfulfilled. They had feared that one day their daughter would wake up and realize she had wasted precious years on trivial pursuits. Chief Adeyemi, a man who had built his empire from the ground up, couldn't understand how his daughter could be so indifferent to the opportunities that lay before her. One evening, as Adeshawa was getting ready to head out to yet another party, her mother called her. Adeshawa, can we talk for a moment please? Alake asked, her voice gentle but firm. Sure, mom, Adeshawa replied, not looking up from the rows of the shoes she was considering. Your father and I have been talking, Alake began, choosing her words carefully. We think it's time for you to consider finding something more meaningful, especially to do with your time. Adeshawa paused, glancing at her mother through the mirror. Mom, I don't need to work. You and dad have given me everything I could ever want. I know we have, my dear, Alake said, stepping closer. But life is about more than just luxury and parties. You have so much potential, my love. Don't you want to explore that? Adeshawa sighed and turned to face her mother. Mom, why can't I just enjoy my life? I am happy the way things are. Just let me be. But happiness isn't just about having things, Shewa, Alake replied, her voice full of emotions. It's about finding purpose, contributing to something bigger than yourself. Your father and I want to see you succeed, to find fulfillment in something meaningful. Adeshawa smiled and shook her head. I'm fulfilled, mommy. I have everything I want. Alake nodded and looked at her daughter, a mixture of love and frustration in her eyes. You're not getting any younger, Shewa, she said gently. Marriage is a beautiful thing, and so is having a career. Don't you want to start thinking about your future? Adeshawa laughed. The idea of settling down was not for her, and it almost seemed absurd. Not for me, mom, she replied, picking out a pair of shoes. I'm not ready to be anyone's wife. I am definitely not in need of a job. I'm living my best life, and that's what matters to me right now, mom. Aleke sighed, knowing that pushing her daughter too hard would only drive her further away. I just want what's best for you, my love, she said quietly. I know, mom, Adeshawa responded, giving her mother a quick hug. But trust me, I'm fine, mommy. Everything is perfect, just the way it should be. The night was alive with energy as the elite of Lagos gathered at the Grand Mansion in Victoria Island for one of the most anticipated parties of the year. Adeshawa arrived fashionably late, as always. She stepped out of her car, her entrance drawing the attention of everyone around. Dressed in a stunning silver gown that shimmered under the light, she exuded confidence and grace. Heads turned as she made her way inside, the crowd parting to let her through. She was used to being the center of attention, and tonight was no different. As she moved through the sea of familiar faces, exchanging pleasantries and smiling as compliments, she felt a pair of eyes on her. Glancing over, she spotted a man standing by the bar, watching her with intense yet curious gaze. He was strikingly handsome, with a tall, athletic build and a sharp, chiseled jawline. His dark eyes held a hint of mischief, and his smile was both inviting and mysterious. Adeshawa felt a spark of curiosity herself. She had seen many attractive men in her life, but there was something different about this one. Intrigued, she made her way to the bar, casually ordering a drink as she positioned herself near him. Enjoying the party, the man asked, his voice smooth and deep. It's one of the better ones, Adeshwara replied, turning to face him. And you? I haven't seen you around before. Yeah, I'm Adebayo, he introduced himself, extending a hand. And you're right, I don't usually attend these kinds of events, but tonight I'm just glad I did. I'm enjoying it. I'm Adeshewa, she responded, shaking his hand. So what brought you out here tonight? He smiled, a charming, easy smile that made her heart skip a beat. A little business, a little pleasure, he said with a wink. But mostly, I came because I heard this place was the place to be. Adeshewa couldn't help but be drawn in by his confident yet relaxed demeanor. There was no arrogance in his tone, just an air of someone who knew who he was and what he wanted. As they continued talking, she found herself laughing more than she had in a long time. He was witty, engaging, and seemed to understand her in a way that few people did. From that night on, Adeshewa and Adebayo became inseparable. Wherever she went, he was there, always by her side, matching her in every way. They attended parties together, dined at finest restaurants, and were often seen driving through the city in Adebayo's luxury cars. To the Lagos elite, they were the perfect power couple, wealthy, attractive, and utterly in sync. He's different, mom, Adeshawa told her mom during one of their rare quiet conversations. He doesn't try to control me. He lets me be myself. Mommy, he's not a control freak, and that's what is important to me. Alake, listening to her daughter, couldn't deny the excitement she saw in Adeshewa's eyes, but she was also cautious. Be careful, Shewa, she warned gently. Not everyone is who they seem to be. Adeshewa waved off her mother's concern with a light-hearted laugh. I know, Mom, but I really think he's different. Adebayo's presence in her life felt like a breath of fresh air. He didn't pressure her to change or to settle down. Instead, he seemed to relish her independence, encouraging her to live her life to the fullest. This was something new for Adeshewa. She had dated before, but none of the men had ever made her feel as free and as understood as Adebayo did. Their connection deepened quickly. Adeshewa found herself confiding in him, sharing her thoughts and dreams in a way she hadn't with anyone else. Adebayo listened, always attentive, never judgmental. He seemed to know exactly what to say and how to make her feel special, valued, and most importantly, in control of her own life. The whirlwind of romance between Adeshewa and Adebayo had captivated the whole Lagos social scene. Wherever they went, they were the talk of the town, with paparazzi often capturing their glamorous outings. It was almost as if they were living in their own bubble, completely oblivious to the world around them. For Adeshewa, life had never been better. She felt alive, exhilarated by the excitement and spontaneity that Adebayo brought into her life. One evening, after attending a high-profile charity gala, Adeshewa drove herself home in her sleek black Mercedes-Benz. Adebayo had stayed behind to finish a conversation with an important business associate, promising to meet her later. As she cruised along the well-lit streets of Ikoyi, she felt a sense of contentment. The city was her playground and she was at the peak of her life. However, when Adeshewa didn't show up at her parents' mansion that night, her mother Alake began to worry. It was unlike her daughter to stay out without notifying anyone. She tried calling Adeshewa's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Perhaps she was at Adebayo's place, Alake thought, trying to calm herself. The next morning, when there was still no word from Adeshewa, panic began to set in. Chief Adeyemi, who had been away on a business trip, was immediately notified. He cut his trip short and returned to Lagos, his mind racing with worry. They reached out to Adebayo, who claimed he hadn't seen Adeshewa since she left the gala. The search began in earnest. Chief Adeyemi used every resource at his disposal to find his daughter. The police were involved, private investigators were hired, and appeals were made on national television. The city was abuzz with rumors and speculations, and there was no trace of Adeshewa. Then, a discovery was made that sent chills down everyone's spine. Adeshewa's car was found abandoned on the Third Mainland Bridge, one of the busiest and most iconic landmarks in Lagos. The sleek black Mercedes Benz was parked haphazardly with the driver's side door slightly open ajar. Inside, the car was eerily empty, no signs of a struggle, no clues to indicate where Adeshewa might have gone. The only thing that stood out was her phone, lying on the passenger seat, completely powered off. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The news spread like wildfire, and the entire city was in shock. How could the daughter of one of the most powerful men in Lagos simply disappear? The media had a field day, and the headlines speculating everything from a planned escape to a targeted attack by business rivals of Chief Adeyemi, but no one knew the exact truth. Days passed, and the Adeyemi household was in turmoil. Alake was inconsolable, spending her days in prayer and her nights pacing the floors of their mansion. Chief Adeyemi, though outwardly composed, was a wreck inside. He blamed himself for not being there to protect his daughter, for allowing her to lead such a public life without sufficient security. Just when hope seemed to be fading, the phone call came. It was late in the evening, and the Adeyemis were gathered in their living room, discussing the next steps with the lead investigator. The phone rang and everyone froze. Chief Adeyemi answered, his hand trembling slightly. Chief Adeyemi, the voice on the other end, was cold and detached. Yes, this is he, Chief Adeyemi replied, his heart pounding. We have your daughter, the voice continued. 1 billion naira, or you will never see her again. There was a collective gasp in the room. Alake clutched her chest, her face pale as she stared at her husband. Who is this and what do you want? Chief Adeyemi demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. 1 billion naira, the voice repeated, slowly and deliberately. You have just 72 hours. No police, no tricks, or you will regret it and never see your daughter again. Before Chief Adeyemi could respond, the line went dead. The room fell into a stunned silence. It was as if the world had stopped spinning. The enormity of the situation hit them all at once. Their beloved Adeshewa was in the hands of ruthless kidnappers, and they had no idea where she was or how to get her back. It was every parent's worst nightmare, and they were living it. Chief Adeyemi immediately sprang into action, instructing his team to gather the ransom money while trying to maintain contact with the kidnappers. The hours that followed were agonizing. Every second felt like an eternity as they waited for another call, another clue that would lead them to their daughter. For Alake, the waiting was unbearable. She could hardly eat or sleep, her mind consumed with fear for Adeshewa's safety. Every time the phone rang, her heart would leap into her throat, hoping and praying for good news. But as the hours passed, the tension in the Adeyemi household only grew. The kidnappers remained elusive, their demands unchanging, their threats becoming more sinister with each call. Chief Adeyemi was willing to do anything to pay any amount to get his daughter back safely. But as the deadline approached, the sense of helplessness weighed heavily on him. Despite all his power and wealth, he felt powerless in the face of this unknown threat. While the Adeyemi's household was engulfed in fear and uncertainty, Adeshewa was far from the terror her parents imagined. She was tucked away in a luxurious suite at one of Abuja's most exclusive hotels, enjoying the kind of comfort and extravagance that she was used to. It was the perfect hideaway and it suited Adeshewa just fine. She lounged on a velvet sofa, dressed in a silk robe with her feet propped up on the coffee table. In one hand, she held a glass of champagne, while in the other, she absent-mindedly scrolled through her phone, checking the latest news about her kidnapping. She had bought another phone and went on social media with proxy accounts. Can you believe this? Adeshewa said, her voice laced with amusement as she read an article aloud. The daughter of billionaire Chief Adeyemi has been missing for days, and sources close to the family revealed that they are willing to pay any amount to secure her safe return. Adebayo, who was sitting across from her at the dining table, looked up from the laptop he was working on. Well, it's all going according to plan, he said, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. He was dressed casually, yet there was an air of confidence about him that made it clear he was in control. Yes, Bayo, it's perfect, Adeshewa said, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she took a sip of her champagne. They will never suspect us. Adebayo nodded, his smile widening. Just keep playing the role, he advised, his tone calm and assured. Once we get the money, we will disappear. Imagine in Shewa, Paris, New York, Bali, we can go anywhere, do anything we want, and no one will be able to touch us or restrict us like your parents used to do. Adeshewa's eyes gleamed at the thought of the life that awaited them. For as long as she could remember, her parents had controlled every aspect of her life. They dictated where she could and couldn't go, where she could go and how she should behave. But this plan, this brilliant, daring plan, was a ticket to true and final freedom. I want to see the look on their faces when they realize we are gone, she said, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. Adebayo chuckled, leaning back in his chair. They will never see it coming, he said confidently. By the time they figure it out, we'll be sipping cocktails on a private beach somewhere, living the life we both deserve. Adeshewa's heart raced with anticipation. The thrill of the deception, combined with the prospect of an endless vacation funded by her parents' wealth, was intoxicating. She had always been the pampered princess, the girl who had everything handed to her, but this time she was taking control, and it felt exhilarating. Well, do you think we will ever come back? Adeshewa asked suddenly, a hint of curiosity in her voice. Adebayo considered her question for a moment. Maybe someday, he replied, his tone thoughtful, but by then we will all be different people. They won't be able to touch us and we won't need anything from them. We would have made all of our own fortunes, he said. Adeshewa nodded, satisfied with his answer. She could see it now, the glamorous life that awaited them from the constraints of her parents' exploitations. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free, like she was finally living on her own terms. While Adeshewa and Adebayo revelled in their seemingly foolproof plan, the police were hard at work, dissecting every piece of evidence they could find. Chief Adeyemi had spared no expense in hiring the best investigators, and their relentless pursuit of the truth that was beginning to yield results. It all started with a routine check of Adebayo's financial records. The investigators noticed several large transactions and sudden, unexplained deposits in his accounts, amounts that hadn't aligned with his usual spending patterns. The unusual activity raised red flags, prompting the detective to dig deeper into his background. What they found pointed a picture very different from the polished, wealthy image Adebayo presented. He's been moving money around, trying to cover his tracks, one of the detectives reported, but he's not as clever as you think. We can trace these transactions. The lead detective, a seasoned officer named Inspector Durojaye, had seen many cases like this before. His instincts told him something was off from the beginning, and now the pieces were starting to fall in place. The more they investigated, the more it became clear that Adeshewa's disappearance was not a typical kidnapping. They need to act fast, Inspector Joe told his team during a strategy meeting. This isn't a kidnapping, it's a scam, and if we don't move quickly, they will disappear for good. The team intensified their efforts, monitoring Adebayo's phone records, tracing his movements, and cross-referencing all the evidence they had gathered. Their work paid off when they intercepted a call between Adebayo and a travel agency where he was making arrangements for two one-way tickets to the Maldives under false names. He's planning their escape, one of the detectives remarked, looking up from the tapped phone line records. Not if we can help it, Inspector Dare replied, his voice steady with determination. With the new information in hand, the police obtained a warrant and set their plan into motion. They tracked Adebayo's recent purchases and discovered he had booked a suite at a luxury hotel in Abuja. The trap was set, and now it was only a matter of timing. The hours tickled by. Adeshewa and Adebayo were blissfully unaware of the net tightening around them. They were preparing for their grand escape, packing their designer luggage and making final arrangements for their flight out of the country. In their minds, they were just hours away from starting a new life, far from the clutches of their parents and the law. But as they were about to check out of the hotel, their plans took unexpected and devastating turn. The authorities moving swiftly, surrounding the hotel with a level of precision that left no room for escape. Dressed in plain clothes to avoid raising suspicion, some of the officers quietly secured all the exits, ensuring that there would be no way out for the unsuspecting couple. Inside the suit, Adeshawa was putting the finishing touches on her outfit, a chic travel-ready ensemble, when there was a loud knock on the door. Adebayo, assuming it was the bellboy, casually opened the door, only to be met with stern faces of several police officers. "Mr. Adebayo Oyindamola, you are under arrest," one of the officers announced, stepping forward with handcuffs at the ready. Adebayo's face paled, and before he could react, the officers pushed their way into the room, swiftly restraining him. Adeshawa, hearing the commotion, rushed out of the bedroom, only to freeze in shock as she saw her boyfriend being handcuffed. "What? What's happening?" Adeshawa stammered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Miss Adeyemi, you are coming in with us," another officer said, moving towards her. "No, this can't be happening," Adeshawa cried, backing away in panic. This was supposed to be perfect, Bayo, but there was no escape. The officers were efficient and within moments. Both Adebayo and Adeshawa were in custody, their carefully laid plans crumbling to dust. Back in Lagos, the news of their arrest hit the Adeyemi household like a bombshell. Chief Adeyemi was sitting in his study when the call came through. He listened in silence as the detective explained the situation, his heart sinking with every word. When Adeshawa was brought back home, she was met with the cold, unforgiving gaze of her father. The look in his eyes was one she had never seen before, an expression of deep betrayal and profound disappointment. "How could you do this, Shewa?" Chief Adeyemi asked, his voice heavy with emotion. He had always believed in his daughter, always thought of her as his precious little girl, but now, standing before him in handcuffs, she was a stranger. Adeshewa, unable to meet her father's gaze, looked down at the floor, tears streaming down her face. The gravity of what she had done finally began to sink in. The realization that she had not only failed but also broken the trust of the two people who loved her the most was overwhelming. Her mother, Alake, stood in the background, her face pale and drawn with grief. She said nothing, but the hurt in her eyes spoke volume. This was a wound that would not heal easily, if ever. The life Adishawa had known, the carefree days of luxury and indulgence, was over as she was led away by the police. The weight of her actions pressed down on her like a crushing burden, leaving her to face the harsh realities of the choices she had made. The days that followed Adeshawa's arrest was the darkest that the Adeyemi's family had ever faced. Chief Adeyemi, once a pillar of strength and authority, found himself wrestling with emotions he had never imagined he would feel towards his only child. He had always been a man of principle, believing in justice and accountability, but when it came to Adeshawa, his heart overrode his convictions. Alake, on the other hand, was a mother torn between love and despair. She spent sleepless nights crying in her room, wondering where they had gone wrong, how the daughter they had raised with so much love and care fallen so far. She was plagued by memories of Adeshawa's childhood, the innocent smiles, the moments of pride, and the hopes that they had for her future. To see her now, caught up in such a scandal, was more than she could bear. The family's home, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and silent. The media had a field day with story, and their phones buzzed with constant calls from friends, business associates, and even distant relatives, all wanting to know more or express their shock. Amid the turmoil, Chief Adeyemi knew he had to make a decision about Adeshawa's fate. The law was clear, and if the charges against her were pursued, she would face significant jail time. But as much as he believed in justice, the thought of his daughter in prison was so unbearable. After long discussions with his wife and her legal team, Chief Adeyemi made the most difficult decision of his life. He would withdraw the charges against Adeshewa, sparing her from the harshness of criminal justice system. But Adebayo, who had masterminded the entire plot, would not be so fortunate. The evidence against him was damning. He was also involved in money laundering, and Chief Adeyemi felt no obligation to protect the man who had led his daughter astray. The day Adeshawa learned of her parents' decision, she was brought home under strict conditions. She wasn't free to return to her old life, but at least she wasn't behind bars. The relief she felt, however, was overshadowed by the shame and guilt that weighed heavily on her. "You didn't need to do this, Shewa," her mom wept during a visit to her room, where Adeshawa sat on her chair, her once glamorous appearance now a shadow of his former self. "We would have given you the world. We would have given you everything you needed." Adeshawa looked at her mother, her eyes filled with tears. "Mommy, but I wanted my own world," she replied, her voice cracking with emotions. "I wanted something that was mine, not something given to me." Alake reached out and hugged her daughter tightly, her heart breaking for the lost and misguided child she held in her arms. "Oh, Shewa," she whispered, "we only ever wanted you to be happy." But Adeshawa knew that happiness wasn't something that could be bought or taken. It had to be earned, and it wasn't found in the superficial things she had valued so much. Even though she had avoided jail term, Adeshawa's ordeal was far from over. As part of her parents' agreement with the authorities, she was sent to a rehabilitation center, a place designed for not just criminals but for those who had lost their way. It was a facility known for a strict regimen of therapy, self-reflection, and personal growth. The center was a far cry from the luxury Adishawa was accustomed to. The rooms were simple, the routines structured, and there was no escaping the daily sessions with counselors and therapists who were determined to peel back the layers of her life and get to the root of her actions. At first, Adeshawa resisted, but went through the motions, attending the group sessions, participating in the activities, but her heart wasn't in it. She still clung to the belief that she didn't need to be there. This was all just a misunderstanding, but as the days turned into weeks and the reality of her situation settled in, she began to confront the emptiness inside of her, the void that she had tried to fill with material things and reckless behavior. One afternoon, during a one-on-one session with a counselor, a gentle but firm woman named Mrs. Ajayi, Adeshawa finally broke down. "I was so blind," she confided, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her face. "I thought money could solve everything. I thought if I had more, if I did more, I would feel complete. But it never did. It never filled the emptiness." Mrs. Ajayi listened patiently, her eyes filled with compassion. "Money can buy many things, Shewa," she said softly, "but it can't buy you peace. It can't give you purpose that comes from within." Adeshawa looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of those words. She had spent so long chasing after something she couldn't even define, something she now realized didn't exist outside of herself. In the weeks that followed, Adeshawa began to change. The daily routines that once felt like a burden became a source of comfort. The therapy session she had initially dreaded turned into a lifeline, a place where she could finally start to unravel the tangled mess of her life. She started to see the world differently, to understand that the life she had led before was shallow and meaningless. The friends she had once surrounded herself with, the parties, the designer clothes, they were all distractions from the real issues that she had been avoiding. Back at home, the Adeyemi mansion was filled with unspoken grief that lingered in every corner. The once vibrant household, which had echoed with laughter and joy, now felt like a place of mourning. Chief Adeyemi and his wife Alake found themselves consumed by a deep gnawing sense of guilt and sadness. They had raised Adeshewa with all the love and resources they could provide, yet somehow she had lost her way. Chief Adeyemi, a man who had built his empire from the ground up, was used to solving problems with decisive actions. But this was different. No amount of money, influence, or strategy could undo the damage that had been done. He spent hours in his study, staring at the photographs that lined the walls, memories of family vacations, celebrations, and milestones. His eyes often settled on one particular picture, a young Adishawa beaming with happiness, sandwiched between her parents during a holiday. Her smile was so wide, so full of life, that it was hard to reconcile with the troubled young woman she had become. As the months passed, Adeshawa's life at the rehabilitation center began to take on a new rhythm. At first, she resisted the structured environment, the daily routines, and the introspective sessions with her counselors. It was hard for her to accept that she needed help, that her life had spiraled so far out of control, but gradually something began to shift within her. The center offers various programs designed to help residents rediscover themselves, from therapy sessions to workshops on practical skills. Adeshawa, who had once scoffed the idea of hard work, found herself participating in these programs. If only to pass the time, she started with small tasks, learning to cook simple meals, tending to garden, and even working in the center's small workshop where residents made handcrafted items. At first it was merely a distraction, a way to occupy the long days. But as she immersed herself in these activities, she began to experience a sense of accomplishment that was new to her. The satisfaction of creating something with her own hands, of seeing a project through from start to finish, was unlike anything she had felt before. It was a different kind of fulfillment, one that didn't come from spending money or attending glamorous events. One day, during a visit from her parents, Adeshawa shared some of these revelations to them. The visit took place in a small cozy room at the center, far removed from the opulence of their home. Chief and Mrs. Adeyemi listened intently as their daughter spoke, her voice steady but tinged with emotions. "I never realized how much I was missing," Adeshawa confessed, her eyes reflecting the growth she had undergone. "All those years, I thought I was happy, but I was just lost. I wanted to feel something real, but I didn't know how." Her mother, Alake, reached out and held her arms, tears brimming in her eyes. "My darling, you're finding yourself now," she said softly, "and that's what we've ever wanted for you." Chief Adeyemi, who had remained quiet, finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "We already are proud of you, my dear," he said, his eyes meeting hers with a look of deep love and respect. "You are taking steps to become the person we've always knew you could be. That takes courage, and we are very proud of that." Adeshawa nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with wealth or status. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace and a sense of purpose. She knew she still had a long way to go, but she knew that she wasn't alone in this journey. When Adeshawa finally completed her rehabilitation, returning home felt both familiar and strangely new. Her parents welcomed her with open arms, her heart filled with hope and cautious optimism. They had seen the changes in her during their visits, but now they were eager to see how she would navigate this new chapter of her life. They were supportive but also knew that Adeshawa needed to take these steps on her own. Determined to prove that she was truly changing, Adeshawa wasted no time in applying for jobs. She didn't want to apply in her father's company because she wanted to prove how determined she had become. She knew she didn't want to rely on her parents' connection or wealth. This time, she wanted to earn her place based on her own merits. The process was humbling. Adeshawa quickly realized that the world outside her privileged bubble was far more challenging than she had anticipated. She faced rejection, skepticism, and the harsh reality that her last name could open doors, but it couldn't keep them open if she had nothing to offer. As the months turned into years, Adeshawa's transformation became more and more apparent. She threw herself into her hard work, taking on additional responsibilities and gradually earning the respect of her colleagues. The same traits that had once been dismissed as signs of her spoilt upbringing, confidence, assertiveness, and keen interest in style, were now seen as assets in her professional life. She learned to channel those traits into her work, turning them into tools for success rather than marks of privilege. Adeshawa's journey wasn't without setbacks. There were moments of self-doubt, days when the old temptations of her former life crept back into her mind. But each time she felt herself slipping, she reminded herself of how far she had come, of the promises she had made to herself and to her family. At work, she began to excel. Her natural flair for communication and her growing attention to detail made her an invaluable part of the team. She started contributing to larger projects, offering insights that helped shape marketing strategies and campaigns. Her colleagues, who had initially viewed her with suspicion, gradually came to appreciate her contributions, recognizing that she was more than just a wealthy girl playing at her job. Adesha's journey had been long and difficult, but she stood on the threshold of a new chapter in her life. She felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. She had learned the true meaning of wealth, and it had nothing to do with money or luxury. It was about satisfaction that came from building something meaningful with her own bare hands, from earning the respect of others, and most importantly, from finding respect for herself. Her family, who had been her rock throughout her transformation, continued to support her, but now their relationship was different. It was no longer about them guiding or protecting her, it was about mutual respect and understanding. Adeshara was no longer the child who needed to be cuddled. She was a woman who had faced her demons and emerged stronger. It was a new beginning, one that she had earned through hard work, introspection, and a commitment to being the best version of herself. And as she looked forward to the future, Adeshawa knew that the lessons she had learned would stay with her, guiding her on the path she has chosen, one filled with purpose, integrity, and true fulfillment. The story teaches us that true fulfillment and happiness come not from wealth or material possessions, but from personal growth, hard work, and self discovery. It emphasizes the importance of finding one's own purpose and the value of redemption and forgiveness. The story also highlights that support from loved ones can be crucial in helping someone rebuild their life, but ultimately, the journey towards becoming a better person is a personal responsibility more than a collective one. Thank you so much for watching this fantastic story on African Stories by Tiana. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing stories. See you next time.